Hey there, let's continue making our Let's Code Easy Android application, which is now available in Google Play Store. So, we are actually showing you how to make an app which is production ready. In this episode, let's venture a little more deeper and understand as to how you can fetch data from YouTube API service using an HTTP client named Retrofit. Let's include the library in our Android project. For that, go to the Retrofit GitHub location and then identify the Gradle path. So once you have it, include it in your project. So go to the dependencies, add a library dependency, and then show or search for that specific path, which is retrofit, and it will show you the latest version, which is currently beta 4. So retrofit would require some converters. So I would go with the converter for JSON. JSON is another library which can be used to deserialize a JSON object to Java classes. So I'm including that. So I have the JSON converter included as well as the JSON library. So once that is done, we can start building the project. So we have included the libraries now. Let's now create a module for including interfaces. So interface is required because the API that we are including here will be converted to an interface, and each and every endpoint will be available through the method definition that we will do. So let's see how it can be done. So the interface that I'm creating is, I'll call it YouTube API. I have already created a method to get the playlist, which will directly translate to how you're seeing this um, URI, which is part equal to snippet is the, you can see that it is part of the get call there, as well as the channel ID and the key, which are two other parameters which I am passing. So those are passed as part of a query annotation. So retrofit works with the interface and multiple annotations. So if your method type is get, you have it as get, and then you define the endpoint and then the query parameters, like it can be, if you are actually trying to get the snippet of the playlist items, then you just need to pass it as particular snippet. And if there are some dynamic query elements, then you pass it as parameters within a query annotation, like playlist ID. If you want to query, then that needs to be passed as a parameter. So I have a couple of parameters where I need to also pass the API key. So this is pretty much how the retrofit works with the interface. So we create an interface, define the annotations like get or post or even the query parameters and everything, and define the methods. And at later point you will be able to use it in the code. We'll see how we can do it in the code now. So for receiving the data, I'll be receiving it as in a JSON format. So the same has to be converted to Java classes or Java objects. So for that, I have used a converter to convert the JSON values to different objects. So either you can use a converter which is very specific to Java, but in this case I have used a converter which is C# specific because I find it a little bit easier to use. But you can also try finding out a converter which is only specific to creating a Java object. So I make the modifications required. So these objects directly translate to the JSON response that we will receive from the YouTube API. I might have to make some changes to the class names because some of the names might be available in the Android library directly. So it's better to actually rename it and then just use the namespaces or the serialized name instead. So these annotations are coming from the JSON library which we included. So these are the two annotations which we need to include to expose the properties. So a serialized name is the same name which is available as one of the JSON elements. So if you are creating a model class, then each and every variable that you're declaring should have a direct relation to the JSON element which you are deserializing. So creating some of the inner classes. So you need to keep creating the classes up to the level up to which you need the data to be available. So either you can choose to expose those data through the serialized name property or the annotation, or you can avoid some of the data which is not required by not creating those classes. So I'm making every variable as private so that I can expose it through a getter. It's a little long, tedious process, but if you're using some other tool like a Java creation tool where it'll ask you to set the format of the data which will be exposed, whether it needs to be JSON or there is one more framework called Jackson. If you're using that, then the annotations might be different than what you're using here. So to make sure that the correct data is coming to these serialized names, make sure that the element name is same as how it is coming from the JSON. You can do that multi-select in Android Studio by just holding the Alt key and then dragging your mouse. So here I'm just using some of the shortcuts to make the development process a little more productive. So this snippet class is where you will get the title and description, everything related to the channel. It also exposes a thumbnails property through which you can get the different resolution thumbnails which you can use to show the different YouTube playlist items. So this is the snippet class which will give you the title of the channel and everything. So we create getters for the properties which you'll be accessing to show within the application. Because it being a listing application, we will not require the setters here. So we are just going with the getter objects. Those are the thumbnail attributes. So the code with the get and set which you saw is actually C# code which we are actually converting to Java code here. So standard is actually a class which is already there in Android framework, so we had to rename everything. But finally, when we expose it, we need to maintain the same name. So Android Studio is providing these tools which lets you easily refactor your code or create a class or optimize your code, and everything is available there. So you can see that so many classes are required to serialize the channel YouTube channel data. So the data is coming along with all the playlist items as well as the channel details. So you can see that I'm setting the same name which are available as part of the JSON. So if it is an array, keep it as a list item. So a channel will have a list of playlists, and each playlist item will have a snippet which will include all the details related to a playlist. So if a variable is public, you cannot create getters and setters for that. So we are almost at the end of creating all the models. So the thumbnail has a URL as well as a width and a height. So based on our requirement, we can choose as to which thumbnail we need to show in the application. So to make it easier, we are doing some abstraction here because all the properties are similar. So we will keep it as a base thumbnail class. And create the required getters. So with that, all you need to do is to extend that thumbnail base. So each and everything will inherit the properties available. within thumbnail base. So we are done with creating the models. Now all that we need to do is to load the data. So for that, let's create a JSON instance using the builder method, and then create the retrofit instance using a builder, and then pass the base URL, which is the Google API URL, which I already have defined in the values section. So I just call the get resources dot get string, and then get the API URL. Also, I need to tell the retrofit instance what is the converter that I am using. In this case, I'm using the JSON object. So my JSON, whatever is being received, will be deserialized using the JSON converter. So once that is done, we will instantiate the API by using the retrofit and passing the interface which we created. So we are creating that by calling that interface and instantiating it as a class. So this will create the YouTube API object, which is directly referencing to the interface which we created. So now all that we need to do is make the get playlist call, which we already defined in the interface. So we are fetching the playlist data, which is the model which we created. So you can see that the playlist method is here. So get playlist, and the callback, the response is a playlist data object. So the parameters that we need to pass here is the channel ID, which is already defined in the string resource, because it is using the Let's Code Easy YouTube channel ID. And the API key is the second parameter, which ideally should not be in the values, but for this tutorial I have kept it in the strings. So I'm getting it both the values and then passing it in a method get playlist. So it is a response type will be a call. So this call will ensure that the call is asynchronous. So all I need to do is do an enqueue method call, and it will give me the response listeners. So on response, if it is successful, I'll receive a 200. successful message as response code. And all I need to do is deserialize the data to the playlist data object. So it will be received through the body. So all I need to do is call the response.body. So to check whether the value is received, I'll just write a logger and see. So all I'm trying to do is get the status code. If it is 200, then we have received the data successfully. Also, if there is some error, we can print it on the on failure section. So we are just showing the message which is received as part of the exception. So let's try running the app by putting a couple of debug points and see whether it is failing or coming back succeeded. It's building and the app is about to run, and it's running now. And we receive the data on response itself, so there is no issues there, and you can see that all the playlists are returned or deserialized, and we receive every detail that is required to be shown in the applications. So we have implemented retrofit successfully in the application now. We are almost halfway through the Let's Go DC Android application development. Keep watching and keep subscribed as more interesting episodes are coming your way soon. Thank you for watching this episode. Give a thumbs up if you liked it. Feel free to comment on sections if you need clarifications or want to provide some feedback. Let's go DC.